We have lots to discuss here in today's video. All kinds of speculation around off-season movement, including some trade talk around teams like the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, and the New York Islanders, as well as a few other teams as well, including Boston, Vancouver. Lots of UFA speculation today around players like Mitch Marner, Brock Besser, John Tavares, and a few others, including the Florida Panthers UFAs, Marchand, Bennett, and Ekblad. Plus, we have several signings today, including Jonathan Toews. We have coaching hires in Pittsburgh and Boston. Plus, we have some news on the NHL schedule for next year. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots of NHL news and lots of trade rumors and UFA rumors to discuss here today, so certainly want to pay close attention, follow the timestamps if need be. There's a lot of info packed into today's video. We'll start things off first with news on the NHL schedule for the 2025-26 NHL season. Normally, we get this schedule around late June or very early July. We've got word today that the NHL schedule is not expected to be fully released until July the 16th. Some teams did start releasing some preseason schedules today. That was mostly in the Western Conference. So you're probably going to see that trickle in here over the next couple of days. So you could expect maybe some details on that ahead of time, but the full schedule won't be until July 16. On the CBA talks, they're still progressing. We don't know an exact date yet when we may get an announcement that it's complete and fully ratified, but at this point, a couple of things that are predominant here is the contract length and the LTIR issue is expected to have some changes to it. It's quite possible that contract length may be reduced. As I mentioned before, it's been brought up again by Chris Johnson, saying that the contract length from right now we have 8 years if you stay with your team, and 7 years if you hit UFA status and talk to other teams. That's expected to drop by 1 year in each case. So it sounds like the max contract length to extend with your current club will drop to 7, and then be 6 years to leave and go to UFA contract. So obviously that could impact a few players' decisions. We're also hearing a lot of rumblings of UFAs, which we'll get into here in a little bit, kind of playing their shorter term game to kind of maximize their earnings, with the cap really expected to change a lot in the next couple of years. The shorter terms might become more common anyway, which also promotes more movement within the league, which I think is great for the game. If you see other sports like the NBA, for example, you get player movement and big trades are pulled off all the time. And I'm not suggesting they're going to become, just like them or anything like that, but having some more movement like we see in that league, I think could create that much more excitement and interest around it. So hopefully we do see some positive changes in that regard. When it comes to long-term injury reserve, as I mentioned, like we talked about the Oilers being scrutinized for the Evander Kane situation, which I'm not sure when we're going to have a final decision on that at this point, but the belief is, according to Elliotte Friedman, he expects there to be something along the lines like we've talked about before, that when you use LTIR during the regular season, nothing's really going to change with how it's used. If you have a player that's going to be out beyond the regular season and you want to add to your roster, that's fine. But when you get to the playoffs, his expectation is that every lineup per game will have to be cap compliant. So, if you're bringing in, like, let's say you have a $9 million player going on long-term injury reserve, and you bring in another player that's $8-9 million, you're now way over the cap. So when you get to playoff time, if that player is able to come back, then you're not going to be able to make your lineup with everybody in it, or you're going to have to sacrifice other areas, which I know in some ways makes it more complicated. It could impact trade deadline activity. It's hard to say, at least for the bigger names maybe, or you're going to see more salary retention to knock numbers down to make it work. But either way, we've had a lot of teams win the Stanley Cup lately being well over the cap, and it sounds like there's enough interest around the NHL amongst enough of the owners and management to finally crack down and change how it's used. So we'll see once we get the final details on the CBA, but that's the speculation on that front. Lots of signings today, including the big one being Jonathan Toews, which is not officially signed, but will be July 1st. We got confirmation today. It was announced by the Winnipeg Jets that they are bringing home the former Stanley Cup winner. Jonathan Toews has signed a 1-year deal with the Jets. It's a complicated contract, but could pay him upwards of $7 million. I think his agent deserves a big award for this one, considering he's been out of the league for 2 years and is getting a potentially $7 million deal. Now, how it works is because he's over the age of 35, you can do a 1-year contract that has a bunch of bonuses built in. So his salary is only $2 million. So for this year's salary cap, that's really all the Jets need to be concerned about when it comes to planning out the rest of their roster. So that's good. But based on the fact that they've given him enough opportunity within this contract to earn up to $7 million, that tells me that they feel he can probably play a big enough role within their team to come close to that. And that tells me that they expect him to be high in the lineup. So as much as some people thought he might be a 3 or 4C, they're kind of paying him like a 2C. So, is he going to be a second line player? I mean, if he can get back to playing anywhere close to his the pre-COVID days, then maybe it'll work out and be a great deal. But the bonuses built in is he has games played bonuses, and they're all $550,000 a piece at 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 games played. So that all adds up. If he hits them all and plays 60 or more games, that's up to $2.75 million that he can earn in games played bonuses. Then he gets a bonus for every playoff round they win, up to a maximum of $1.25 million. And then he gets another $1 million bonus on top of that if they win the Stanley Cup. Now, obviously, winning the Cup, very tall, tough task. Not saying they couldn't do it. They were the President's Trophy winners this past year. Realistically, if he can play the games, that should be $2.75 million. That should be achievable if he's healthy, and he's believed to be. So that's one thing right there. The playoff one, up to the 1.25. Even if they win a couple of rounds, maybe they end up paying them either $500K or $750K. Even let's say they don't win the cup, but they go to like conference final or even the second round. Then you're probably looking at somewhere around $5 to $5.5 million total cap hit. If he can give you 40, 50 points at least, that's not a terrible hit. But the concern for me is the unknown, the fact that he hasn't played in so long. What is he going to be? That's the tricky part. So I hope for his sake that he's able to produce. I hope for their sake that he's able to produce and it works out for them. But it just comes with more risk than I expected. I just assumed him being a veteran who's made tons of money before and has been out of the league for 2 years, that we'd see like a 1-year deal with maybe a $1 to $2 million salary, and I knew there'd probably bonuses in there. I just didn't think it'd be anywhere near that lucrative. I thought maybe $1 or $2 million more in bonuses, that he could maybe earn $4 million or something. That's kind of what I was thinking, but clearly not. His agent deserves an award for getting him that contract, but there was lots of other interest, so I don't think it was going to be an issue to get it one way or another. So Toews is officially back in the NHL. Will be with his hometown Winnipeg Jets next year. A bunch of other signings here today. Nothing nearly as lucrative as that, but we get Matthew Robertson, pending RFA with the Rangers, has signed. He gets a 2-year deal, $775 at the NHL level. It's a 2-way contract, $500K. Guaranteed money for next year, so obviously that's a more lucrative AHL deal, and tells us that they expect him to at least play some NHL games next year, which is promising to take the next step in his career. The Avalanche have signed a couple of players, mostly for the Eagles, I would suspect, but their AHL franchise, but Matthew Steinberg and Jason Pollan both get 1-year deals. The Dallas Stars signed a pair of restricted free agents, including Maverick Bourque, who I thought was a prime offer sheet candidate, so clearly they want to take care of business here early. 1-year deal at $950. I thought that a team would, if they were stuck within their cap situation, they kind of still are, that if a team would offer sheet him, obviously he has to agree to it, he has to sign it, but if that's what they're willing to pay him, and another team comes along and says, hey, here's $3 million, that's awfully hard to say no to. So I thought we might see something like that, but they're protecting themselves, and Jim Nill's getting ahead of it. Like I said, he's already signed Matt Duchene. He's already traded Mason Marchment, and then he gets Maverick Bourque signed. Then he signed Nils Lundqvist, 1 year, $1.25 million. He's been a busy guy getting a lot of these things taken care of. The belief is they have some sort of handshake agreement with Jamie Benn. He will be back. But I think we may see a wait-and-see approach for the official signing of the contract, just to get some other stuff done. Because they traded Duchene, they signed Duchene, traded Marchment. It's the same value on the contract. So basically, they moved Marchment for draft picks and gave his money to Duchene. They're in the same cap situation before signing him. And these contracts will play a small role as well. So they have some more work to do. And we'll see what they do here. The Carolina Hurricanes signed another big piece of their bottom six. Eric Robinson, who had a career season with Carolina, gets a 4-year contract at $1.7 million. I like this deal. He's been around the league long enough. He's got a good amount of experience and really fit in well with their system. Guy with good speed and just plays the way that they like. So great fit in their bottom six, and this should age well. The Flames also signed Dryden Hunt, 2 years, 2-way deal, $825, and the Kraken re-signed Cale Fleury as well on a 2-year contract, a 1-way though, so 2-year 1-way deal, $890. So a good value signing on that front. The NHL's first buyout window is officially opened as well. So I suspect over the weekend we're probably going to see some of our first buyout candidates. I know some of the names out there include a couple of Dallas Stars players if they can't be traded first, like Matt Dumba. Is the prime one, maybe Lyubushkin, but probably Dumba being the more likely one there. But of course, Jim Nill's going to try to trade them first. TJ Brody of Chicago is another name. We've done a video on this with some of the top candidates. Now, Philip Grubauer in Seattle is the name I'd watch. I'd watch Kotkaniemi out of Carolina. There's a bunch of others. There's a lot. So if you haven't checked out my video going over the top offer sheet, So if you haven't already checked out my video with the prime buyout candidates, it was just posted last week, so certainly go check that out. But that window is officially open. We should have news on the first few of those in here, or I would suspect likely over the weekend or coming days here very soon. A couple of coaching announcements. Boston Bruins today announced they've hired Steve Spott as an assistant coach, so he'll join the staff there now. Marco Sturm, of course, Steve Spott's been basically a sidekick of Peter DeBoer for, I think probably a better part of a decade with his last 3 teams. I think he was with them. I know he was with them in Dallas. I believe he was with them in Vegas and San Jose as well, if I'm not mistaken. So he's been working with DeBoer for a long time. He'll go to Boston. And the Minnesota Wild are hiring former Anaheim Duck head coach Greg Cronin, but he's going to be the head coach for their American Hockey League team in Iowa. And the Pittsburgh Penguins, we talked yesterday about Nick Bonino retiring and taking an assistant coaching role. That was officially announced by the Penguins today. And they've also, within that staff, have hired Rich Clune. Of course, he just recently retired 2 years back, was an assistant coach. I think the first year he worked with the Marlies as an assistant coach. He played with the Marlies a long time towards the end of his career, and then he was in, I believe, in Anaheim or San Jose. I think he was with the Ducks last year. And then Todd Nelson, who also has been the long-time Hershey Bears head coach and had a lot of success there, leaving Hershey and joining the Penguins bench as an assistant coach as well. Now, a lot of rumors around the NHL, all kinds of speculation. Of course, we're getting within a week to the draft. The trade activity is starting to pick up, and of course, UFA's just over a little bit more than a week away in July 1st. So here's the latest on the UFA front when it comes to a few smaller names. Tanner Jeannot in Los Angeles, not expected to return according to LA media. So I thought he might re-sign there. Apparently that's not looking like the case. So expect him to be on the move. When it comes to Brock Besser out of Vancouver, the belief is that there might be a chance he stays in Vancouver, but it's not expected that he's going to sign a contract with Vancouver before July 1. I think the only chance that he goes back to Vancouver is that if he gets to the market and the offers that he's expecting just aren't there, and maybe he doubles back to Vancouver to say, okay, maybe I'll lower my demands and see if he can work something out. But most likely, the expectation is he probably moves on. I've seen Minnesota has been linked to him, like I suggested before in my free agent prediction video. And also another team to watch, according to some, think there's a chance he may end up with the New York Rangers. But of course, that would be a reunion with his old line mate and buddy JT Miller. But from a cap perspective, they do have more flexibility than they did before, but they still don't have a lot of room that way. So I'm not sure they can pull that off unless his price comes down, but some think it might be a possibility. With Mitch Marner out of Toronto, Elliot Friedman's wondering that the possibility of Marner maybe not going 7-8 years, or I guess he won't go 8 years because he won't be signing in Toronto. At least that's the expectation. But he may not go max term, that he could go shorter. and like a lot of these other top NHL players are doing, and possibly doing anywhere from like a 2, 3, or 4 year deal. Now, the belief is still that the Kings, Golden Knights are expected to be some of the top contenders here. Now, we had heard from Darren Dreger back a few days ago, which we discussed here, saying that he believes that the Marner free agency may drag out over a period of time, that we may not see a signing on July 1st. That Marner might want to kind of hold court, if you will, but like John Tavares did back when he was a free agent 7 years ago, take meetings with all these teams, and then after doing some meetings, probably over the phone or virtually, then have some visits, and he thought it could drag on to the middle of July. Well, Elliotte Friedman was saying today that he's heard the same sort of thing, that some wonder if they're going to try to do that and he can take his sweet old time. But he's also heard that a lot of teams are not really thrilled about that. And as much as they want to have the player, I know what my reaction to that when we first heard it from Dreger, when I first talked about that, I want to say that was sometime in the past week on the video, I said the problem with that is that some teams are not going to want to wait around. Like if they have a meeting, they're not going to want to wait a week to find out if they're getting a player or not, right? So Friedman's kind of expressed the same thing that he's hearing from NHL executives, saying that some of them may go into these meetings and kind of put the pressure on and say, like, we're only going to give you a day to let us know, or something like that. A very short period of time. So like, we'd love to have you. Here's our offer. What do you want to do? And, you've only got so many hours or maybe a day to respond, because if we don't sign you, we need to pivot to a new plan and figure out what we're going to do, another player we may target, etc. And we can't be waiting around for like a week, 10 days, etc. So his plan might kind of blow up and backfire on him if he really wants to drag it on that long. Some teams might be patient, but most of them are not going to be, because they have to know what's going on so they can make plans B, C, and D if they don't work out, right? So ultimately, we'll see. But the expectation is that he may do a 7-year deal, but he may not, because he could do another big contract in a couple of years' time when the cap's even much higher, might even cash in again. So we'll see. Latest on John Tavares out of Toronto. I still think that the vast majority of people would have to make a prediction that he'll likely stay in Toronto. But I know Friedman was talking on his podcast today, saying that there's people that have been telling him that, based on what's happened so far in the early part of free agency, and obviously nobody's switched teams yet because it's not July 1st, but we've had some re-signings, and a contract that might be comparable, if you will, would be his old teammate in Long Island, Brock Nelson. So he got a 3-year contract, over $7 million. So like, Tavares was, 38 goals, I think it was last year. Like, he had a really good season. So as much as a lot of people said he was slowing down and all this, and, and some aspects of his game are slowing down, but he's still a really smart player. He's still a really good battler in front of the net and on the boards. They're still good on faceoffs. Like, there's aspects to his game that are going to translate well into his older years because of just, a smart player. Like, he knows how to utilize everything. Now, the feet slowing down, sure. Can he skate as well as he needs to be a centerman long-term into his later 30s? That's the part that's up for debate. But no matter what, he's been productive, and he's a good player. He's effective. So he's going to get paid no matter how he shakes it. If he really wants to be in Toronto, like I said, he's going to have to take a discount. I think they're going to push him hard. It sounds like the era of just handing money over a fist to all their players, like we saw with the Dubas era, is probably coming to a close, and that they're going to probably negotiate a little bit harder, getting some of these numbers down. But like I said, if he can get to free agency, then even though his preference is to stay in Toronto, other teams can talk to him and present him with other offers. Maybe somebody comes along and says, hey, come play with us 3 times 8. As much as he wants to stay in Toronto, if he asks them to match that, they're probably not. So as much as I still would leverage the idea of him probably staying in Toronto, if his agent, who was Pat Brisson, one of the best of the game, who just did this Jonathan Toews contract, ultimately, like, there's going to be options for him to make more money. So I do wonder if maybe the money talks enough that he gets intrigued to leave. I'm not sure. So we'll have to wait and monitor that scenario. And I guess we'll find out just how bad he wants to be a Leaf, because, like I said, if he wants to take a discount, then great. He can get that discount and be a Leaf for the rest of his career. Now, the guys in Florida, of course, most of you have probably seen all the videos of them celebrating and partying. But so you get Brad Marchand, of course, who's basically reminds me of what we saw with Ovi back in 2018. This guy's partying at a whole other level. You get Sam Bennett, Aaron Ekblad are the main culprits there for the UFA stuff. So when it comes to Bennett, we saw him in a bar chanting 8 more years, and we've seen him do the whole skit from Wolf of Wall Street saying, I ain't leaving. But nothing official is done. His agent's probably not thrilled with that because he probably just lost some leverage. But the belief is, and Friedman said on his podcast today, which I agree with wholeheartedly, that pretty good chance that they probably can keep 2 out of 3 of these guys. I mean, it doesn't mean they will, but they can. I know Bill Zito on an interview, I think it was Pat McAfee's show he was on, said that they are confident they can bring them all back. But I'm like, he just won a cup. He's not going to go in an interview and say, yeah, we're probably only bringing back 1 guy. We're going to keep 2, we just can't do that. Like, that's not going to happen. He's going to say he's confident and everybody can stay, da-da-da-da. But reality is that the belief is Bennett is probably the main guy who's going to take less money to stay there. The belief is that they were trying to get him before on an 8-year deal, around $7 million, like something basically almost the same as Carter Verhaeghe, and that wasn't accepted. Maybe they up that a little bit. Maybe they go 7.5, 8, but I don't think they're going to really go much higher than that. He could probably get 10 or more in free agency, but then you factor in a change in team. The no state tax does play a small role, but honestly, I don't think it's going to play that big of a role. It's the lifestyle. It's everything that goes with playing in Florida. They've won back-to-back championships, and to me, I just think he's the perfect fit there. I don't know you can say he's going to have the exact same success if he changes teams. Like, it's hard to say. Not everybody works out that way. So the belief is that Bennett, out of the 3, is the most likely to stay. I know he proclaimed himself 8 more years through the party videos we've seen. That doesn't mean it's going to happen for sure, but it's likely. And then when it comes to Marchand, I don't know what to think about Brad Marchand, to be honest. I know one social media post on Instagram saying that Marchand to the Leafs, there was a comment on one of the other reporters saying that, I think it was Nick Kiprio, saying that the Leafs are going to be pushing hard to get him, and he can't envision a world where they aren't successful in landing him. And he commented on it and said, geez, the world wants to see this, or something along those lines. So, we really don't know what he's going to want to do. But at the same time, he was interviewed at Dairy Queen today because he was doing a promotion with Dairy Queen after the blizzards and all that took off. And he said that, what do you get to say to Bill Zito? And he's like, give me a contract. So I think he'd love to stay in Florida, to be honest. And the feeling we get around Aaron Ekblad is that Ekblad's most likely going to leave. I know if you look at all the party videos that are circulating, they were all on the microphone at the bar last night. And it sure sounded like when Ekblad was talking that it was a goodbye speech. So I think Ekblad is not getting anywhere near the term he wants to stay in Florida. So the belief is he's probably a goner, and he's going to have lots of interest. I don't know where he's going to end up. Some think that the Leafs would go after him too, but the belief around him is that the Leafs would only want to sign Ekblad if they're going to talk to Morgan Riley about waiving his no-move clause and trading Morgan Riley. So I don't know. I know that's something, I think it was Kiprio saying that. I mean, he's not always the most accurate, but, would they try that? The belief is that they weren't going to ask Morgan Riley about waiving, but, obviously they could. So I honestly think if I had to wager right now, I'd say Ekblad's probably leaving, Bennett's probably staying for sure, and Marchand, I can't peg him. I think there's a decent chance he stays. I'd probably put it 50-50. But it's believed that the Leafs are going to, if he makes it to July 1, throw a huge offer at him. So we'll see what happens around that. That's all of our free agent kind of speculation. And lastly, on Connor McDavid too, a lot of people still think that he's signing in Edmonton, but maybe he doesn't do max term either. Maybe he does a shorter term, and we'll see where things go. But that'll be updates here probably in a few weeks' time. Now, on the trade front, New York Islanders are getting lots of attention. We've heard about the talks between the Bruins, the Flyers. We've heard that Pajot's name is out there. We've heard Romanov's name is out there. And now we're hearing that they are quietly exploring the trade market for Noah Dobson. That came from Elliot Friedman. Friedman saying, essentially we know that he's looking for a big ticket. He's not far away from being an unrestricted free agent. The Islanders are not set on trading him or anything, but they feel like before they get into a contract that's going to, possibly be, say $80 million or more, that they need to at least look at this and be like, okay, if we did trade him, what could we get? Right? And what's the best course of action for this team? You get a new GM there, Matthew Darsh. It's just exploring things. Dobson's a 25-year-old right-handed defenseman, good size, good puck skills, good offensive abilities. Defensive game could be better, but it's not the worst, but it's far from the best. So ultimately, the value would be pretty good. I think they could get a good return. Guys like Pajot and Romanov, they have some value, but nowhere near what Dobson would have. The belief is that they'd love to get their hands on another first-round pick besides the first overall selection and try to get James Haggins there too. And I think it might take a player like Dobson to get it, whether it's Boston or Philly or one of those picks in that 5, 6, 7 range. That would be the teams to kind of watch that might end up happening. But of course, like I said, doesn't mean Dobson's getting traded, but they are having conversations to kind of quietly gauge what the market looks like. What do you think teams would be willing to pay? And just kind of, having some initial chatter out there just to see. So again, we'll see. The Oilers, based on comments from Stan Bowman, are sure as heck going to be making some goalie changes. They mentioned in their press conference today that the D-core is probably going to stay mostly the same, but the goalies and the forwards will be the area of the team that sees the most change. A lot of speculation that obviously with saying the goalies are going to change would be a pretty good indication that they're not going to have a tandem next year of Pickard and Skinner. And we talked before, I don't know which direction they're going to go in. They are either going to keep Pickard, trade Skinner, and bring in another guy, and then Pickard to be the backup, and then whoever comes in will be the starter. We talked about John Gibson. They had trade talks with Boston about Swayman before, but that was earlier last year, so I'm not sure that the Bruins really want to do that now, but they've looked at it before. Demko's rumored to be available. I'm not sure if they would go down that route, but somebody along those lines. If they brought in a guy who could play 60 games, maybe they do that. But the more likely scenario, from what a lot of people think, is that they keep Skinner and bring in another goalie to work with them. So could be some of those same names we've mentioned. If they go to the UFA front, one name that I would watch, and I don't know really if they're going to pursue it, but Jake Allen to me is the best goalie on the UFA market. It's a thin goalie market, but he's been a starter, he's been a backup, he's been a tandem, he's got lots of experience, he's got a Stanley Cup. To me, he's still really steady, and he could be a guy to work with in a tandem with Skinner that could kind of solidify things. Might be the much cheaper way of going about it from a team with not great cap situation. The other thing too is that they need to solidify it, and I guess they'd have to be really confident that he would be the right guy. Or do they get him, like I said, one of the other guys? Do they make a push to get a Demko or a Gibson or somebody who they are comfortable that can come in and be the starting goalie for years to come? But either way, change is coming. We don't know if Skinner's getting traded or if he's going to have a guy working with him, but it's quite likely we see change between the pipes in Edmonton. Evander Kane is definitely out there. Victor Arvidsson's definitely out there. They're definitely two players the Oilers would like to move on from. Even Kane could maybe be a buyout candidate as well. That's not a complete out of the question, but if they can move his contract and get the whole amount off, would be better. But if that's proving difficult, then they could look at a buyout for him too. But either way, I do expect Kane to likely be moved along. I think it's fair to say, as usually happens to him after a period of time, that he's kind of worn out his welcome with Edmonton. It's time for a change. And in Calgary, their provincial rival, we've seen reports today that the Flames and Rasmus Andersson have engaged in contract extension talks. And the belief is that now that they've kind of had a chance to talk and exchange initial, feelings on how things could look, that they're very far apart and not really anywhere close to being on the same page, which makes a trade more likely. But we've heard enough reports saying that if they don't get a trade offer that they really love, they're content to hang on to Andersson, and he might be a name to watch closer to the trade deadline. He could be moved later for that. So we'll see. But lots of activity around Edmonton, New York Islanders, Calgary, lots of UFA stuff, especially Toronto and Florida, the big ones, Brock Besser, Vancouver, lots of stuff happening here today. So we'll see. It's going to be a busy week, lots of speculation. Activity's picking up, so stay tuned. This is the place to get all your updates here at Top Shelf Hockey. So make sure you subscribe if you're new. Leave some comments below with your thoughts, and I'll catch you next time.